Hello, and welcome to week 2, which is lectures on the frontier encounters. And generally, in my in-class classes, you will have a lot of lecture on Native people, as well as the transcontinental railway system, cowboys, settlers, and the myths of the West. However, since week 3 is so big for this online class, I'm going to condense a lot of the lectures, and they're not going to be as many or as intense. So for this lecture series, I will be giving you a lecture on the Transcontinental Railway. It is a condensed version. It's still pretty long, but it's condensed. As well as one Native People Massacre, which is the massacre of at Battle. The Shivington Massacre, which is really important, as well as one of the more successful on Native wars, Native People Wars, which is one of the last Native People Wars, which is the Nez Perce Wars, or the Ninipu. And that takes place in Idaho, Washington, a little bit of Montana. And then I'll give you a little bit of Native culture assimilation, as well as kind of the myths of the West. So you'll have 5 lectures, which is a lot less than I had intended, but so you will be able to get all the information quickly. That is really what we're going to be talking about in this class. It's important to note when you're talking about Native people cultures is to really frame it in not so much of a genocide setting. And the reason why that's important is if you treat people as victims rather than survivors, you take away the agency. You take away their ability to move on past that. So we're going to be framing Native cultures in the understanding that they are survivors. And there's been a renaissance within Native cultures within the last 20 years where we can actually see a lot of growth in not only of art and languages coming back, and we're going to talk about why they had to come back in general within the lectures of assimilation. And it's really important to give Native cultures their agencies. I've actually lived on 2 reservations. I grew up on a reservation, and it's really important, at least for the cultures that I lived around, to understand that it's not just about being about being survivors rather than victims, because it gives them more continuance. I, in fact, have a friend who now lives in West Virginia, and she says there's so many people around that area that firmly believe that Native people do not exist anymore, that it's a myth, that they do. And that's really disfortunate for Native cultures around, particularly around the United States, including in the West, where they're thriving in many ways. And so we're going to be framing yes, we are going to be talking about a massacre, but we're also going to be talking about a very almost successful stand-up to the U.S. government, but from the periods of really from 1851 to 1900. It was a big struggle for Native peoples, and you see a lot of the last stands of the big revolts, the big uprisings, which is the Battle of Little Bighorn, Greasy Grass, if you're talking from the Lakota perspective. You also have the Nez Perce Wars, you have the Modoc Wars, you have the Apache Wars, you have the Navajo Wars. There's a lot of warring cultures that are going on. And then you have Wounded Knee, which is vitally important, but your book does discuss this. So we're going to be talking about 2 wars that your book really doesn't get in, or 2 Native experiences that your book does not talk about, just so you can get a varying perspective. It's really fascinating, and I feel like I'm doing a disservice to to Native peoples, but there's only so much you can take in a week. We're not going to end our full discussion on Native cultures, which has a tendency when you are talking about a survey in U.S. history of never bringing them up past 1900, and we will hopefully get to talk to him a little bit during the Great Depression era, but we're definitely going to be talking about Native peoples in the culture, in countercultures, which is a big week as well, and talking about the AIM movement, the American Indian movement, which is, it changes so much. So that is kind of the context in which we're going to be discussing this week. I hope you enjoy.